Brothers and sisters, let me ask you straight. Are you giving God your best or just what's left? Think about it. If someone you love only ever gave you their scraps, the leftover time, the leftover energy, how long before you'd feel unimportant? Yet so many of us do that with God every single day. And here's the truth. The difference between living a life of power and purpose or a life of emptiness is found in this one question. Who gets your best first? Imagine being in a relationship where every single time you meet up with the other person, they're distracted, tired, and only half present. They give you whatever scraps of energy they have left after pouring themselves out into everything else that seems more important. You'd notice it, right? You'd feel like you were an afterthought. At some point, you'd question whether they actually value you at all. Now that might sound a little harsh, but it's the perfect mirror for how many of us treat God. We tell ourselves he's a priority, but when we look at the reality of what we're offering him, so often it's the leftovers. It's the quick prayer we mutter while half asleep. It's the rushed thought we send up while scrolling through notifications. It's the church service we attend when our schedule happens to be clear, not because we set it aside deliberately. And here's the kicker. It's not that we don't care. It's that we've allowed everything else to take the prime space in our lives. There's a huge difference between someone who gets the first and best of us and someone who gets the crumbs. Think about your work life. If your boss asked for your top performance, but you consistently showed up late, exhausted, and gave them only the tiny margin of focus you had left, how long do you think you'd last in that role? Not very long. Excellence requires energy. Presence requires effort. Attention requires intentionality. And the truth is, God deserves all of that more than anyone else, yet we often give him the opposite. This isn't about guilt, it's about honesty, because honesty is where growth starts. It's not that giving God something is meaningless. Of course, he can take even our smallest offering and use it, but there's a deeper point here. What we give communicates what we value. If someone walked into your home and you served them the scraps from yesterday's dinner instead of a fresh meal, they would absolutely feel the difference. It's not about whether the scraps were edible, it's about the message it sends. You weren't important enough for me to prepare something new. The truth is, the leftovers of our time, our attention, and our resources are often the most convenient gift. They don't cost us much. They don't stretch us. They don't require sacrifice. But anything that doesn't require us to stretch rarely has transformative power. God is not looking for perfection. He's looking for priority. And priority is revealed in what we give first, not in what we offer when we finally have a bit of energy left. Think about the way you feel when you're someone's priority. You can tell when a friend calls you before they start their day instead of squeezing you in at 11 p.m. You can tell when someone saves the best part of their schedule for you. That communicates love, it communicates value, and it communicates honor. Why would our relationship with God be any different? Here's the irony. The moments we give him first, whether that's in our morning, in our finances, or in our decisions, actually shape the rest of our day and our identity. Starting your morning with God doesn't just give him the best part of your day. It calibrates your heart, your perspective, and your energy. You walk into everything else with clarity instead of chaos. When you give God your best thoughts, your best focus, your best energy, you're not losing anything. You're aligning yourself to receive more. But the trap is convenience. Convenience whispers, I'll get to it later. God understands. I'll give him whatever I can manage at the end. And while it's true that God does understand, what we forget is how that habit slowly shapes us. It makes God feel like a side note rather than the centerpiece. Over time, it conditions us to believe he's optional, not essential. And eventually, that bleeds into how we see everything else. When you're used to giving God scraps, you'll also get used to giving scraps in other areas of life. Scraps of effort in your work, scraps of presence in your relationships, scraps of discipline in your health. Leftovers become a lifestyle. There's a deeper problem with leftovers. They represent what's already been consumed. When you give leftovers, you're essentially saying, here's what I didn't need. But think about how transformational it is to give something that actually cost you. Time you could have spent on yourself, money you could have used elsewhere, energy you could have saved. The cost is the point. It's the cost that communicates honor. If it costs nothing, it communicates little. And the irony is, giving your best doesn't mean you have to give the most. Sometimes we confuse those two. Your best is not about comparing yourself to what someone else gives. Your best is about what you're capable of offering in this moment. For some, their best might look like an hour of undistracted prayer and study. For another, in a season of exhaustion, their best might be 15 minutes of focused attention before anything else starts pulling at them. The question is not, did I give more than someone else? The question is, did I give the best of what I had? When you live that way, you're not just honoring God, you're actually training yourself to live with integrity. You're building the muscle of giving fully, not partially. You're teaching yourself that the most important things in life deserve your best energy, not your convenient scraps. And once you build that habit with God, you naturally carry it into everything else. Suddenly, your friendships get the best of your attention instead of the half-distracted version of you. Your work gets the best of your creativity instead of the burnt-out, procrastinated scraps. Your health gets the best of your discipline instead of the guilt-driven, last-minute attempts. It always starts with what we choose to prioritize. If you give your leftovers to God, don't be surprised if you feel like your life is running on leftovers. Leftover energy, leftover motivation, leftover clarity. But when you give Him your best, it shifts something inside of you. It changes how you see yourself. It reminds you that you are someone who honors what matters most, not someone who casually tosses aside the core of who you are for convenience. It's not about perfection, it's about intention. Because at the end of the day, the message is simple. If you truly value someone, they don't get the crumbs, they get the feast. And God is the one relationship in your life that deserves the table, not the scraps under it. Think for a moment about the word excellence. It's one of those words we often reserve for professional life. The standout employee, the award-winning performance, the person who goes above and beyond. But excellence is not just about achievement. It's about attitude. It's about the spirit in which you do something. And when it comes to our relationship with God, excellence becomes a form of worship. It's not about perfection and it's not about showing off. It's about saying, this matters so much to me that I'm going to bring the very best of myself to it. God doesn't need anything from us. He is complete, self-sufficient, lacking nothing. But the way we live, the way we give, and the way we show up reflects whether we truly value Him. Excellence is not about trying to impress God because He's not impressed by external performance. He sees the heart. Excellence is about alignment. It's about showing through our actions that we recognize who He is and that our gratitude runs deep enough to shape the way we live. Think about the difference between someone who does something just to get it done and someone who does it with care. Imagine you're given a gift. One person tosses it in a bag, doesn't wrap it, and hands it to you while distracted. Another person carefully wraps it, writes a note, and looks you in the eye when giving it. Both gave you something, but only one communicates value. Why? Because one reflects excellence, thoughtfulness, intentionality, effort. That's how our lives look to God. Two people might give Him time or serve or give resources, but the way they do it, the spirit in which they offer it communicates whether it was worship or just routine. Excellence doesn't always mean more. It means better. A short prayer whispered with focus, humility, and honesty is far more excellent than a long, empty string of words recited just to tick the box. A small act of generosity done with joy and sacrifice is more excellent than a large donation given begrudgingly or for recognition. God cares less about the size of what you do and more about the sincerity and spirit in which you do it. That's why excellence is a form of worship. It flows from the heart outward. But here's the catch. Excellence costs something. It always costs. It costs energy, attention, sometimes convenience, sometimes comfort. Which is why we often settle for good enough. We pray distracted. We serve half-heartedly. We give reluctantly. We do just enough to feel like we've checked the box, but not enough to really feel it in our spirit. And yet, when you look at the moments that truly transform you, they almost always involve going beyond convenience. Excellence pulls something deeper out of you. Excellence is also contagious. When you carry a spirit of excellence in your relationship with God, it spills over into every area of life. You don't just show up to work. You show up with focus and integrity. You don't just show up in your relationships. You show up with presence and care. You don't just try to get by in your health or finances. You approach them with discipline and attention. This isn't about perfectionism. It's about raising your standard so that what you offer is worthy of the values you claim to hold. A big mistake we often make is thinking excellence requires extravagance. We imagine excellence means buying the most expensive things, creating the grandest gestures, or giving the largest amount. But that's not true. Excellence isn't about extravagance. It's about effort. It's about heart. A handwritten letter can be more excellent than an expensive gift if it carries genuine thought. A 5-minute prayer where you pour out your heart can be more excellent than an hour spent mindlessly repeating words. Excellence is measured not by size, but by sincerity and intention. Look at how this plays out in the small moments of life. When you choose to pray, excellence means you silence distractions, put away your phone, and give God your undivided attention. When you serve, excellence means you don't just fill a role, but you do it with care, knowing that even small acts matter to Him. When you work, excellence means you work as if you're working for God Himself, not just for a paycheck or approval. That mindset turns everyday moments into acts of worship. It's easy to underestimate the power of small things done with excellence. A smile offered with genuine warmth, a word of encouragement delivered with sincerity, a task completed with diligence. These may seem ordinary, but when done with excellence, they carry weight. They reflect the character of God through you. People notice when something is done with care. They notice when someone takes pride in the details. Excellence communicates value not just upward to God, but outward to people. It says, I respect you enough to give you my best. There's another layer to this. Excellence shapes identity. When you consistently give your best in honor of God, you begin to see yourself as someone who lives with integrity. You stop cutting corners in the areas that matter most. You begin to take ownership of the way you show up. And slowly you stop being satisfied with mediocrity in your own life because you know you're capable of more. This isn't about performance for approval. It's about stepping into the kind of person God created you to be. Someone who reflects His nature in the way you live. Think about how this shows up in giving. If you give reluctantly, as if it's a chore, it communicates that you see it as an obligation. But when you give joyfully, sacrificially, and with gratitude, that's excellence. It's worship. It's saying, God, you've given me everything, so I'm going to give back with a spirit that reflects my love for you. The act may look the same from the outside, but the inner posture changes everything. Excellence is not about the act itself. It's about the heart behind the act. Excellence also requires consistency. It's not a one-time burst of energy. It's a lifestyle of showing up with intention. Anyone can have a moment of passion, but true excellence is steady. It shows up when you're tired, when you're busy, when no one is watching. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It flows from who you are becoming. And in that way, it's deeply tied to worship. Because worship isn't just a Sunday activity. It's a way of living. It's a recognition that every moment, every act, every choice is an opportunity to honor God. That's why excellence matters so much, because excellence is not about being flawless. It's about being faithful. It's about taking what you have and offering it with full intention, full care, full heart, whether that's in prayer, in service, in giving, or in the way you carry yourself day to day. Excellence communicates to God that He is worth your best. And in giving Him your best, you begin to live as the best version of yourself. One of the easiest traps we fall into is the belief that we can honor God later. Later when life is less busy. Later when the career stabilizes. Later when we've saved more. When the kids are grown. When we finally feel like we have it all together. Later sounds noble. It sounds like we're planning to give God our best. But really what we're doing is postponing honor. The problem with postponing is that it always leaves God with the leftovers. Because life never actually slows down in the way we imagine. There will always be another deadline, another commitment, another reason why now doesn't feel convenient. If we wait for later to give God our best, later almost never comes. That's why honoring God is about the first of what we have, not the last. It's about making Him the priority, not the afterthought. Think about it in the context of relationships. Imagine telling someone you love, I'll make you a priority later. You'd never say that because you know how it would feel to them. It would communicate they're not important enough for your time today. Love is shown in what you do first, not what you fit in after everything else. The principle of giving God your first shows up all throughout Scripture. The idea of first fruits wasn't just about crops. It was about heart posture. It said, before I use any of this for myself, I'm giving to you first. That act wasn't just symbolic. It was trust. It was saying, God, I trust you enough to give you the best before I even know what the rest will look like. It was a declaration that he was the source, not just someone to be tipped at the end. This principle is just as true today. Giving God the first part of your day in prayer and reflection sets the tone for everything that follows. It's not about how long it is, it's about what it communicates. Before I answer emails, before I scroll, before I jump into the chaos, I'm giving you my first focus. That shifts not just your relationship with God, but your entire perspective on the day. You enter the day grounded instead of playing catch up. The same principle applies to your resources. If you wait until the end of the month to give to God, you're usually left with scraps. Whatever wasn't spent on bills, groceries, or wants. But when you set aside a portion first before anything else goes out, you're communicating trust. You're saying, God, I'm not waiting to see what's left. I'm giving to you first because I know you'll provide for the rest. That mindset changes how you view everything else. It shifts you from scarcity thinking to trust thinking. This best first, not best later approach is really about priorities, because priorities aren't determined by what we say, they're revealed in what we actually do. Everyone says God is a priority, but the test is simple. Does he get the first of your energy, time, and resources, or does he get what's left when everything else has had its share? If you were to look at your calendar, your bank statement, your daily habits, they would tell you what your true priorities are. Not your intentions, but your actual ones. It's uncomfortable to face that reality, but it's also freeing. Because once you see it, you can choose differently. You can decide that God doesn't just get squeezed into the margins. You can decide that he comes first, even when it feels costly. And it will feel costly at times. Waking up earlier to pray feels costly. Giving financially before you know how the month will shake out feels costly. Serving when you're tired feels costly. But that's the point. Honor is proven in what costs you something. If it never costs, it never communicates value. Think about how we treat people we truly value. If someone important to you asked to meet, you'd rearrange your schedule. You'd make it work, even if it was inconvenient. That's what honor looks like. And when we say we honor God, but only give him what's easy, what's convenient, or what doesn't interfere with our plans, we're not actually honoring him. We're accommodating him. Honor and accommodation are not the same thing. Honor says you come first. Accommodation says I'll fit you in if I can. One of the biggest dangers of waiting for later is that it trains us to believe that later will be easier. We imagine a future where we'll have more time, more money, more energy, and therefore be more generous, more consistent, more intentional. But if we don't build the habit of giving God our best now, we won't magically start later. Later only reflects the habits of now. If you give God scraps when you're single, you'll give him scraps when you're married. If you give him scraps when you're struggling financially, you'll give him scraps when you're wealthy. The pattern doesn't change just because circumstances do. It changes when your priorities change. That's why best first is such a powerful principle. It breaks the habit of postponing. It forces you to practice honor in the present, not in the imaginary future. And here's the beauty. When you give God your best first, you often discover that you actually have more than enough for everything else. It's almost counterintuitive. You'd think giving away your best first would leave you with less, but in reality, it creates alignment. You find yourself more disciplined with your time, more intentional with your resources, more focused with your energy. When God as first, everything else gets filtered through that lens, and it brings order where there was once chaos. Think about how much lighter life feels when your priorities are clear. So much of our stress comes from trying to juggle too many things and constantly feeling like we're dropping the ball. But when you've settled in your heart that God comes first, it simplifies decision making. You no longer wrestle with whether you'll pray, whether you'll give, whether you'll serve. Those things are already decided. And because they're decided, you can approach everything else with more peace. This isn't about legalism. It's not about tallying up hours or percentages. It's about posture. It's about saying, God, I'm not waiting to honor you until it's convenient. I'm not waiting to honor you until I feel ready. I'm honoring you now with what I have, where I am. That posture changes everything. It takes honor out of theory and puts it into practice. Ultimately, giving God your best first is an act of trust. It's saying, I believe you'll take care of me, so I'm not going to cling to what I have as if you're not enough. I'm going to give you the first, even when it feels risky. And every time you do that, you're reinforcing trust, not just in your words, but in your actions. You're training your heart to depend on God's provision, not your own control. And here's what happens over time. Your faith grows. You stop seeing God as someone you squeeze into the margins and start seeing him as the foundation. You stop living as though he's optional and start living as though he's essential. And when he's essential, everything else finds its rightful place. Every time you choose to give your best to God, something far deeper is happening than just the act itself. On the surface, it might look like prayer, serving, giving, or simply setting aside time, but underneath, it's shaping your identity. You're not just doing something for God, you're becoming someone in the process. And the distinction is critical because life is not only about what you do, but about who you're becoming as a result of what you choose to do consistently. Think about the choices you make every day. They're like bricks. One brick doesn't build a house, but place enough of them in alignment and suddenly you've created something you can live in. In the same way, each time you give God your best, it's like laying a brick in the foundation of your character. Over time, those bricks form the kind of person you are. Someone who doesn't cut corners. Someone who honors what matters. Someone who shows up fully. It's not about one dramatic moment. It's about the steady pattern that shapes who you are at the core. There's something powerful about living with integrity, and integrity is really just about wholeness. It's when your actions line up with your values. When you say you believe God is worthy of honor but only give him leftovers, that creates dissonance inside you. You feel the gap between what you say and what you do. That gap erodes confidence. It chips away at your sense of purpose because deep down, you know you're living below your standard. But when you give him your best, you close that gap. You live aligned, and that alignment brings peace. It reinforces the belief that you're living in a way that's consistent with who you want to be. Giving your best also shapes how you see yourself in relation to God. When you offer scraps, you subtly reinforce the idea that your relationship with him is casual, optional, or secondary. But when you give him your best, you start to internalize the truth that this relationship is central. You begin to carry yourself as someone who belongs to God, someone whose life is defined by honor, not convenience. That identity shift changes everything. It affects how you make decisions, how you handle pressure, how you interact with people. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. The beautiful part is that this identity doesn't stay confined to your spiritual life. It bleeds into every other area. When you train yourself to give God your best, you naturally start giving your best elsewhere too. It becomes part of your DNA. In relationships, you show up with presence instead of distraction. At work, you contribute with excellence instead of just going through the motions. In your personal growth, you take ownership instead of waiting for change to happen. The standard you practice with God becomes the standard you carry everywhere. Think about the opposite for a moment. If you repeatedly settle for giving God your leftovers, that habit seeps into your character as well. You begin to normalize giving the minimum. You become comfortable with half effort, with delayed priorities, with making excuses. And soon that mindset isn't just about your spiritual life. It becomes how you operate in general. You start showing up halfway in relationships, halfway in goals, halfway in commitments. Leftovers become your pattern. And deep down, that pattern doesn't feel good. It leaves you restless because you know you're capable of more, but you've trained yourself to live on less. When you give your best, you start to build a reputation with yourself. And that's important because the most powerful reputation you'll ever have is not what others think about you. It's what you believe about yourself. If you know that you consistently give your best, you begin to trust yourself. You start to walk with confidence, not because life is perfect, but because you know you're living with integrity. On the other hand, if you constantly hold back, you struggle to trust yourself. You second guess, you doubt, you hesitate because you know that your actions don't match your words. This is why giving God your best is so transformational. It's not about trying to earn. H is love. You already have that. It's about shaping your own sense of identity as someone who lives in response to his love. It's about saying, because you've given me everything, I refuse to live half-heartedly. I want my life to reflect gratitude. And gratitude expressed through excellence is one of the strongest forces for shaping character. Another layer to this is how giving your best changes the way you handle challenges. When you've built the habit of showing up fully, you don't crumble as easily under pressure. You've trained yourself to lean in rather than shrink back. You've taught yourself that even when it's uncomfortable, you can still give your best. That resilience comes from practice. And that practice often starts in the quiet, unseen moments of your relationship with God. The person who disciplines themselves to give God their best in private is the same person who can stand strong in public challenges. There's also joy in living this way. Many people think giving your best will leave you drained, as if pouring out excellence will exhaust you. But the truth is, mediocrity drains you more than excellence does. Half effort leaves you feeling unsatisfied because you know you didn't truly show up. Excellence, on the other hand, energizes you. It gives you a sense of fulfillment because you know you live fully in that moment. That joy is multiplied when it's directed toward God because it carries eternal significance. You're not just working hard for temporary rewards. You're aligning your life with something eternal. Giving your best also attracts trust from others. People notice consistency. They notice when someone is reliable, when someone doesn't cut corners, when someone operates with integrity. By giving your best to God, you're indirectly shaping how others experience you too. They see you as someone dependable, someone who honors commitment. Hence, someone who takes responsibility seriously. And that opens doors, not because you were seeking recognition, but because excellence naturally creates influence. This way of living also combats the culture of comparison. When your focus is on giving your best, you stop obsessing over what others are doing. Excellence is not about doing more than someone else. It's about doing the best with what you've been given. That frees you from envy and insecurity. You no longer feel the need to measure yourself against others because you know your standard. Give God your best. That standard is clear, consistent, and personal. It allows you to live with focus rather than distraction. Ultimately, the habit of giving your best creates momentum. The more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. It stops feeling like a forced effort and starts feeling like your identity. And once it becomes identity, it's no longer a question of should I give my best? It's simply who you are. You become the kind of person who doesn't hold back, who doesn't cut corners, who doesn't give scraps. You become the kind of person who reflects honor in everything you do, because honoring God with your best is no longer just an action. It's your way of being.